The plasma beam cut through the corridor, leaving a trail of molten metal in its wake. Captain Nico dodged behind a support column, breathing hard as the heat singed his uniform. His ship, once the pride of the Kalan Republic's peacekeeping fleet, was now a burning tomb for half his crew. "Captain!" The communication unit on his wrist crackled. "President Vale needs you on the bridge immediately." Nico checked his tactical display. 3 more Vorak boarding parties were cutting their way through the lower decks. He had maybe 10 minutes before they reached the command center. "On my way," he replied, motioning to his security team. They moved in practiced formation through the flickering emergency lights, stepping over fallen comrades whose faces were frozen in expressions of surprise. The Kalan Republic had been at peace for so long that many of his people had forgotten what war truly meant. Until today, until the Vorak Empire decided that the resource-rich Kalan Prime was their next conquest. The bridge was barely recognizable, consoles sparked, officers worked frantically at backup stations, and through the main viewport, Nico could see the devastation unfolding above their homeworld. The peaceful blue-green planet that had nurtured Kalan civilization for millennia now served as backdrop to a massacre. Red dots, Vorak warships, overwhelmed the scattered blue defenders on the tactical display. President Vale stood at the center of the chaos, her tall frame silhouetted against the viewport. Once known for her flowing ceremonial robes and diplomatic finesse, she now wore a simple military uniform, her long silver hair tied back severely. "Captain," she acknowledged him without turning. "We've lost the orbital defense grid. The planetary shield will fail within hours." Nico swallowed hard. "The civilian evacuation? 20% complete at best. We need more time." She finally faced him, and Nico was struck by the conflict in her eyes, despair warring with determination. "I've made a decision, Captain, one that breaks with 5,000 years of Kalan tradition." She gestured to the communications officer, who looked uncertain. "Madam President, the Council hasn't approved." "The Council members are either dead or scattered." Vale cut in. "As the last elected leader of our people, I am invoking emergency powers." She straightened her shoulders. "Prepare the distress signal, all frequencies, all languages in the database. No encryption." A murmur ran through the bridge crew. The Kalan Republic had always maintained a policy of self-reliance, avoiding entanglements with other galactic powers. To broadcast an open distress call was to admit defeat, to beg for intervention. "Who would even answer?" Nico asked quietly. "The Zenturi Collective withdrew behind their nebula years ago. The Omega Alliance has a strict non-intervention policy." Vale's expression hardened. "We're not calling them." She nodded to the communications officer. "Do it." The young officer's fingers flew across the console. "Signal ready, Madam President." Vale took a deep breath. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of billions of lives. "To all civilized worlds capable of receiving this transmission, this is President Vale of the Kalan Republic. Our peaceful civilization faces extinction at the hands of the Vorak Empire. We have no military capable of withstanding their assault. Billions of innocent lives, children, elders, ordinary citizens who have never raised arms against another, will perish without immediate assistance. We beg any power with the means to intervene. Help us. Please." She nodded, and the message began broadcasting, repeating in hundreds of languages, spreading outward at the speed of light from their communications array. A desperate cry into the darkness. "It won't be enough," Nico said softly, looking at the tactical display. The Vorak fleet was methodically destroying every Kalan vessel, taking their time, confident in their superiority. "Perhaps not," Vale agreed. "But I will not let our people vanish from the universe without at least asking for help." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Now, Captain, I need your remaining ships to buy time for the evacuation. Every minute means thousands more civilians reaching the escape corridors." Nico understood the order beneath her words. It was a suicide mission. His fleet, what remained of it, would need to engage the Vorak directly, drawing their attention while transport ships fled the planet. "Yes, Madam President," he said, saluting crisply. Outside the viewport, a Kalan cruiser exploded in silent fury, its debris scattered across the stars. "It has been my honor to serve the Republic." Vale's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "The honor has been mine, Captain." She returned his salute. "May we meet again in whatever lies beyond." As Nico left the bridge to rejoin his command vessel, he felt a strange calm settle over him. The end was coming, but he would ensure it was an end worthy of the Kalan Republic's proud history. His people would be remembered not just for their art, philosophy, and peaceful achievements, but for their courage in their final hours. The distress call continued to pulse outward, carrying the desperate plea of a dying civilization into the void. 12 light-years away, in a solar system dominated by a yellow dwarf star, the message reached its first potential savior: Earth. The Earth Defense Council chamber fell silent as President Vale's transmission echoed through the room. The holographic projection showed her desperate face, the chaos of the bridge behind her, the sincerity of her plea unmistakable even across the gulf of space. Admiral Hayes, commander of Earth's expeditionary fleet, studied the reactions around the circular table. Secretary Morgan's face had settled into diplomatic neutrality, masking whatever she truly thought. General Parker was already running calculations on his tablet, likely assessing military response scenarios. Director Collins of Intelligence stared at the projection with narrowed eyes, searching for deception where there was none. When the message ended, Chancellor Rodriguez, who had called this emergency session, spoke first. "The Kalan Republic has maintained peaceful relations with Earth since first contact 80 years ago. They've shared scientific knowledge freely and respected our boundaries." She paused. "They've never asked for military assistance before." "Because they've never needed it." Hayes said, "The Vorak Empire has been expanding for centuries, but they've avoided confrontation with technologically advanced civilizations, until now." Secretary Morgan leaned forward, her voice measured. "While the humanitarian crisis is concerning, Earth's policy of galactic neutrality has served us well. We're still recovering from our own conflicts. Our fleet is designed for defense, not power projection 12 light-years from home." "Let's be clear about what we're discussing." General Parker interjected. "The Vorak don't just conquer, they consume. Every world they've taken has been stripped of resources and populations enslaved. If they're moving against major civilizations now, Earth could eventually be in their path." Director Collins tapped his stylus against the table. "Intelligence suggests the Vorak believe our technology is comparable to the Kalans. They don't know about our unique development path." Hayes knew what Collins meant. While most galactic civilizations had developed energy weapons, shield technology, and faster-than-light travel along similar lines, humanity had taken a different route. Earth's bitter conflicts, the resource wars, the Arctic campaign, the Pacific confrontation, had forced military innovation along more primitive but sometimes more effective paths. "The Vorak use energy shields and plasma weapons." Hayes said, "They've never faced kinetic bombardment, railguns, or our drone swarms. We could surprise them and draw their attention directly to Earth." Morgan countered, "Admiral, you're proposing we abandon decades of neutrality to involve ourselves in a conflict that could bring the full might of the Vorak Empire down upon us." Hayes stood, moving to the tactical display at the center of the room. "With respect, Madam Secretary, neutrality only works when dealing with reasonable actors. The Vorak aren't reasonable, they're predators, and predators eventually hunt everything within reach." He manipulated the display, showing Earth's defensive grid, the orbital platforms, the lunar batteries, the Mars staging areas. "Our home defenses are strong, but our best strategy has always been to engage threats before they reach our system. The Kalan Republic is asking for our help, strategically. Helping them is helping ourselves." Chancellor Rodriguez studied the display. "What forces could we realistically commit without compromising Earth's security?" Hayes had anticipated the question. "Expeditionary Group Alpha, 12 ships, including the EDS Redemption and Defiance. We maintain full defensive capability here with the remaining fleets." 12 ships against the Vorak Armada? Morgan's skepticism was evident. "Admiral, that's not intervention, it's sacrifice." "Not necessarily," Hayes countered. "The Vorak have never encountered our technology. We don't need to defeat their entire fleet. Just damage it enough to force a withdrawal and buy time for Kalan evacuations. The debate continued for hours, arguments circling and recircling the central question. Was Earth ready to abandon its neutrality and potentially make itself a target for the sake of another civilization? General Parker eventually broke the deadlock. Chancellor, while we debate, the Kalan are dying. If we're going to act, it must be now. Rodriguez looked at each council member in turn, weighing their input, the responsibility of the decision heavy in her eyes. Finally, she nodded. Admiral Hayes, you have authorization to deploy Expeditionary Group Alpha to render humanitarian assistance to the Kalan Republic. Your primary mission is to facilitate civilian evacuation. Engage Vorak forces only as necessary to accomplish this objective. Hayes saluted. Understood, Chancellor? As the council members gathered their materials. Secretary Morgan approached Hayes privately. I hope you understand what's at stake, Admiral. If you fail, you won't just lose your ships and crews. You might set Earth on a path to war. Hayes met her gaze steadily. And if we do nothing, we tell the galaxy that humanity will stand by while innocents are slaughtered. That's not the Earth I've sworn to defend. Morgan studied him for a long moment. Then don't fail, Admiral. She turned to leave, adding over her shoulder. The Redemption is a fine flagship. Make sure you bring her home. Hours later, as Hayes oversaw final preparations aboard the Redemption, he received a private message from Chancellor Rodriguez. Admiral, officially your orders are to facilitate evacuation with minimal engagement. Unofficially, make the Vorak regret they ever heard of humanity. Godspeed. Hayes smiled grimly as the message deleted itself. 12 ships against an empire. The odds were impossible. But humanity had faced impossible odds before. The EDS Redemption emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kalan system, followed closely by 11 other ships of Earth's Expeditionary Group Alpha. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge, watching as his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Ortiz, assessed the situation. Multiple Vorak signatures, Admiral, Ortiz reported. Main fleet appears to be in orbit around Kalan Prime. We're detecting numerous smaller engagements throughout the system. Hayes studied the holographic display. The Vorak fleet vastly outnumbered anything Earth could field, but they were spread thin, hunting down fleeing Kalan vessels. Any response to our hails? Communications Officer Zhang shook her head. Nothing from the Kalan government frequencies, sir. Wait, picking up a military channel. It's weak, possibly from a damaged vessel. Put it through. The holographic display flickered, resolving into the image of a Kalan officer. His uniform was torn and burned, his face streaked with soot, but Hayes recognized the rank insignia. This is Captain Nico of the Kalan Republic. Identify yourself. Unknown vessels. Hayes stepped forward. Captain, I'm Admiral Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet. We received your President's distress call and have come to render assistance. Disbelief crossed Nico's features, followed by a flash of hope quickly suppressed. Earth? You're 12 light-years from home, Admiral? And you need help. Where's President Vale? Nico's expression darkened. Her ship was destroyed 3 hours ago while covering a civilian evacuation corridor. I have assumed command of our remaining forces, 5 damaged cruisers and 7 support vessels. We're hiding in the asteroid belt of the outer system. Hayes nodded grimly. Captain, I suggest you rendezvous with us at these coordinates. We need to coordinate our response. After Nico's image disappeared, Executive Officer Commander Reynolds moved closer to Hayes. Sir, with only 5 Kalan ships still operational, our combined force is still dramatically outnumbered. Numbers aren't everything, Commander. Hayes turned to tactical. Lieutenant Commander Ortiz, what Vorak forces are nearest to our position? Patrol group, sir. 8 vessels. Appears to be screening the system perimeter. Classification? 4 destroyers, 4 frigates, energy shields, plasma cannons, standard Vorak configuration according to intelligence. Hayes smiled thinly. And they've never encountered Earth vessels before. He turned to his XO. Commander Reynolds, battle stations. We're going to introduce ourselves to the Vorak Empire. As alarm klaxons sounded throughout the ship, Hayes addressed the fleet. All vessels, this is Admiral Hayes. Our first objective is to eliminate the Vorak patrol group ahead of us. Weapons free. Combat Protocol Epsilon. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Protocol Epsilon, developed for asymmetric warfare against technologically superior opponents, was considered theoretical. It had never been tested in actual combat. The 12 Earth ships accelerated toward the Vorak patrol, maintaining tight formation. On the Vorak vessels, alerts would be sounding as they detected the approaching unknowns. "They're powering weapons, Admiral," Ortiz reported. "Shields at maximum." "Hold course," Hayes ordered. "All ships prepare to execute on my mark." The distance closed rapidly. The Vorak, confident in their superior technology, maintained position, preparing to engage the foolish newcomers who dared challenge them. "Range?" Hayes asked. 30,000 kilometers in closing. They're charging plasma batteries. "Launching first salvo in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mark." From the Earth vessels, what appeared to be hundreds of small objects erupted, spreading outward like a cloud of insects. "Drones away," Ortiz confirmed. "The Vorak are tracking them with point defense systems." On the tactical display, the tiny dots representing Earth's combat drones swarmed toward the Vorak patrol. The alien vessels fired energy beams, destroying dozens of drones. But there were too many targets. "Kinetic packages deploying," Ortiz reported as the first wave of drones reached their targets. Unlike the energy weapons the Vorak were accustomed to, Earth's drones carried simple yet devastating payloads, tungsten rods that, when accelerated to sufficient velocity, could penetrate even advanced energy shields through sheer kinetic force. The Vorak shields, designed to dissipate energy attacks, did little against physical objects moving at such speeds. "Multiple impacts," Ortiz announced, unable to keep a note of satisfaction from his voice. Vorak vessels reporting shield failures and hull breaches. The second wave of drones targeted the weakened areas, focusing their attacks with swarm intelligence that adapted to Vorak defensive measures in real time. "Sir, 2 Vorak destroyers have suffered critical damage," Ortiz reported. "One frigate is venting atmosphere." Hayes nodded. "All ships close to railgun range. Target the damaged vessels." The Earth fleet accelerated again, closing the distance to the disoriented Vorak patrol. As they came within range, massive electromagnetic railguns extended from concealed positions on the human vessels. "Railguns charged and ready. Admiral, fire!" The electromagnetic accelerators launched solid projectiles at velocities that made them nearly impossible to track visually. They struck the Vorak ships with devastating force, punching through weakened shields and armored hulls alike. 3 Vorak vessels exploded in rapid succession, unable to withstand the kinetic bombardment. The remaining 5 attempted to regroup, their commanders clearly shocked by the effectiveness of what they had likely dismissed as primitive weapons. "They're attempting to coordinate a plasma barrage," Ortiz warned. "Evasive pattern Delta." Hayes ordered, "Frigates Indomitable and Valiant, flank and deploy chaff screens." The Earth vessels broke formation with practiced precision, making it difficult for the Vorak targeting systems to lock on. Meanwhile, the flanking frigates released clouds of metallic particles that disrupted the Vorak sensors. When the Vorak finally fired, their plasma beams largely missed their targets, dissipating harmlessly in space, or being absorbed by the chaff screens. The few hits scored on Earth vessels were absorbed by their layered armor, designed specifically to handle energy weapons. "All ships, second railgun salvo," Hayes commanded. "Focus fire on their command vessel." The coordinated barrage struck the largest remaining Vorak destroyer. Its shields collapsed under the assault, and the kinetic penetrators tore through its command center. The destroyer listed, power fluctuating, before secondary explosions tore it apart from within. "Remaining Vorak vessels are breaking formation," Ortiz reported. "They appear to be retreating toward the main fleet." "Pursuit course," Hayes ordered. "Don't let them warn the others." The Earth vessels surged forward, unleashing their remaining drones. The retreating Vorak ships, already damaged and disoriented, stood little chance. Within minutes, the last of the patrol had been reduced to expanding debris fields. Hayes surveyed the tactical display with grim satisfaction. "Damage report?" Minor hull breaches on the Valiant and Resolute. Reynolds reported, being sealed now, no casualties. Admiral. Communications Officer Jung interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from Captain Nico. His fleet has arrived at the rendezvous point. When the Kalen captain's image appeared on the display, his expression was one of stunned disbelief. Admiral Hayes, my tactical officer informs me you just destroyed an entire Vorak patrol group without losing a single ship. Hayes nodded. Different technology, different tactics. The Vorak weren't prepared for our approach to warfare. In 3 days of fighting, we couldn't destroy more than 2 of their vessels, at the cost of nearly our entire fleet. Nico said, a hint of bitterness in his voice. Your ships are designed for peacekeeping. Captain, ours are built for war. Hayes leaned forward. But now we need to combine our strengths. Your knowledge of this system and Vorak patterns, our firepower. How many of your people still need evacuation? Nico's expression grew more focused, hope beginning to replace despair. At least 2 billion on Kalen Prime. There are evacuation corridors established, but the Vorak have blockaded the main routes to our emergency hyperspace points. Then our first priority is breaking that blockade. Hayes decided. Captain, I'd like you to transfer to the Redemption to coordinate our efforts. After Nico arrived aboard the Earth flagship, the combined fleet developed their strategy. The Kalen's extensive sensor network gave them precise intelligence on Vorak positions, while Earth's unexpected combat effectiveness provided the means to act on that intelligence. Their first joint operation targeted a Vorak blockade force guarding the largest evacuation corridor from Kalen Prime. The Earth vessels deployed in an arrowhead formation, drawing Vorak attention with a frontal assault, while the remaining Kalen ships used their superior maneuverability to slip behind the enemy and attack from the rear. Caught in the crossfire and confused by Earth's unconventional tactics, the Vorak blockade crumbled. Immediately, hundreds of civilian transport ships began pouring through the corridor, carrying thousands of Kalen refugees toward safety. Over the next 48 hours, the combined fleet repeated this pattern, striking Vorak forces throughout the system, always targeting blockade points to maximize civilian evacuations. They never engaged the main Vorak fleet directly. That would have been suicide, but instead employed hit-and-run tactics that left the Vorak commanders increasingly frustrated and disoriented. After a particularly successful operation that cleared the way for a massive evacuation convoy, Captain Nico joined Admiral Hayes on the Redemption's observation deck. Through the viewport, they could see the distant lights of thousands of ships, carrying millions of Kalen to safety. You've given my people something we'd lost, Admiral, Nico said quietly. Hope? Hayes watched the evacuation fleet. We've bought time, Captain, but the Vorak still outnumber us. Eventually, they'll adapt to our tactics. Perhaps, Nico turned to face him. But news of your victories is spreading. The Vorak have never been defeated like this. The galaxy is watching. You think others might join the fight? The Zenturi Collective has always feared being the Vorak's next target. The Omega Alliance values their independence. If they see the Vorak can be beaten... Nico left the thought unfinished. Hayes nodded slowly. Then we keep fighting. Keep showing the galaxy it's possible to stand against the Empire. And we continue saving my people. Nico added, every ship that escapes carries our culture, our knowledge, our future. Hayes placed a hand on the Kalen captain's shoulder. We'll save as many as we can. Captain, you have my word. As if to punctuate his promise, alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. Admiral to the bridge, Commander Reynolds' voice came over the intercom. When Hayes and Nico arrived, the tactical display showed a massive formation of Vorak vessels moving toward their position. They've consolidated their forces. Ortiz reported, 63 ships on intercept course. Hayes studied the display, mind racing through options. Their combined fleet, now supplemented by several repaired Kalen vessels, still numbered only 23 ships. We can't stand against that many, Nico said, voicing what everyone was thinking. No, Hayes agreed. But we don't need to defeat them, just delay them long enough for the current evacuation wave to reach safety. He turned to his XO. Commander Reynolds, prepare for Operation Firebreak. Reynolds paled slightly but nodded. Yes, sir. Firebreak was a last resort tactic, using converted cargo vessels as impromptu minefields. It would work only once, and it would cost them ships they couldn't afford to lose, but it might buy the precious time they needed. As the orders went out, Communications Officer Zhang suddenly straightened. Admiral, I'm detecting new hyperspace signatures at the system edge. Vorak reinforcements? Hayes asked, tension evident in his voice. Zhang's expression shifted to confusion, then surprise. No, sir. The signatures match. Zenturi configurations, 15 vessels, heavy cruiser class. Before Hayes could respond, another report came in. More signatures, sir. Omega Alliance recognition codes, 22 ships. Nico moved to Hayes' side, his voice barely above a whisper. They came. They actually came. The tactical display updated as more ships continued to arrive, representatives from a dozen minor powers, all dropping out of hyperspace around the Kalen system. Not vast armadas, but token forces, symbols of solidarity. A communication request flashed on the main screen. When Hayes accepted, the image of a Zenturi commander appeared, tall, with crystalline features that caught the light. Admiral Hayes of Earth, the Zenturi said formally. I am Commander Crix of the Zenturi Collective. We have monitored your defense of the Kaleen people. The Collective has decided that the Vorak threat can no longer be ignored. We offer our assistance. Before Hayes could respond, a second communication connected, an Omega representative, their characteristic blue skin luminescent under their vessel's lighting. The Alliance stands with Earth and Kalen, the Omega diplomat declared. The Vorak have presumed too much for too long. More communications poured in, pledges of support, offers of assistance, declarations of solidarity. The galaxy, it seemed, had been waiting for someone to take the first stand against the Vorak Empire. Hayes exchanged a look with Nico, whose eyes shone with emotion. Coordinate our new allies, Hayes ordered. Let's show the Vorak what happens when the galaxy unites. The battle that followed would later be known as the Liberation of Kalen Prime. The combined fleet, now numbering over 60 vessels from a dozen different civilizations, engaged the Vorak force with a diversity of tactics and technologies that the Empire had never faced before. Earth's kinetic weapons punched holes in Vorak shields. Zenturi crystal beam technology disrupted their communications. Omega gravitational manipulators hindered their maneuverability. And the Kalen, fighting for their homeworld, demonstrated a ferocity that belied their peaceful reputation. When the Vorak commander finally ordered a retreat, nearly half the Imperial fleet lay in ruins, while the Allied forces had lost only 11 ships. As the Vorak vessels limped away into hyperspace, a cheer went up across all Allied frequencies. On the bridge of the Redemption, Captain Nico approached Admiral Hayes, offering a formal Kalen salute. My people have a saying, Admiral, the darkest night brings the brightest dawn. You have given us that dawn. Hayes returned the salute. This is just the beginning. Captain, the Vorak won't take this defeat lightly. No. Nico agreed, his expression sobering. They won't. But for the first time in centuries, they know they can be beaten. He looked out at the stars, where the Allied fleet now secured Kalen Prime's orbit. And so does the rest of the galaxy. General Rex stood rigidly before the holographic projection of Emperor Kane, his posture perfect despite the wound that still burned along his left side, a souvenir from an Earth railgun fragment. The Emperor's features were shrouded in the traditional war helm of the Vorak, only his eyes visible, burning with cold fury. Explain yourself, General. The Emperor's voice was deceptively soft. How did 12 vessels from a barely spacefaring civilization manage to rout your forward elements? Rex had rehearsed his answer carefully. The humans employ unexpected technology, my Emperor. Primitive in design, but effective in application. They use kinetic weapons that our shields are not optimized to repel. And you failed to adapt? We began modifications immediately, but by then they had allied with the Zenturi and Omega forces. The combined fleet. Spare me your excuses. The Emperor cut him off. The humiliation of this defeat has spread across our territories. Subject worlds whisper of resistance. Client states reconsider their loyalties. He leaned forward, his image growing larger. This cannot stand. General, Earth must be made an example. Rex swallowed. The humans' home system is heavily fortified, my Emperor. Their defensive grid will burn like everything else. The Emperor's voice had dropped to a whisper, more terrifying than any shout. I am deploying the Imperial fleet, 1,000 ships, under my personal command. Rex couldn't hide his surprise. The Imperial fleet hadn't been fully mobilized in centuries, not since the subjugation of the Kryloth domains. We will crush this Earth, General. We will reduce their cities to ash, their oceans to steam, their population to memory. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. And you will be at the vanguard, to atone for your failure. Is that understood? Yes, my Emperor. Rex bowed deeply. It will be done. After the transmission ended, Rex remained in the chamber, thoughts racing. He had seen the footage of Earth vessels in combat. Their tactics were unorthodox, their weapons crude but devastating, and now they had allies, a coalition forming around their unexpected victory. But the Imperial fleet was another matter entirely. Nothing in the galaxy could stand against such overwhelming force. Could it? On Earth, preparations for war proceeded with grim efficiency. The Defense Council had been expanded to include representatives from the newly formed Galactic Alliance, Captain Nico for the Kalen, Commander Crix for the Zenturi, and Ambassador Lyra for the Omega Alliance. Among others, Admiral Hayes stood before the assembled leaders, the tactical display showing the latest intelligence. Our sources confirm the Vorak are mobilizing their Imperial fleet, approximately 1,000 vessels, including their super dreadnoughts. Their target is unquestionably Earth. Chancellor Rodriguez's expression remained calm, though her eyes betrayed her concern. Time estimate? 3 weeks at standard hyperspace velocity. Hayes answered. But we believe they'll proceed more cautiously, consolidating forces and establishing supply lines. That gives us perhaps 5 weeks to prepare. The Alliance will contribute all available ships. Captain Nico declared. The refugee fleet has already volunteered 300 vessels, being retrofitted for combat as we speak. The Zenturi Collective commits 100 cruisers and our latest crystal beam technology. Commander Crix added, Our engineers are working to adapt it to Earth vessel specifications. Ambassador Lyra nodded. The Omega Alliance pledges 85 ships and our gravitational disruptors. Additionally, we offer sanctuary for Earth civilian evacuations if necessary. Secretary Morgan, who had opposed intervention initially, now leaned forward. While these contributions are significant, we're still outnumbered more than 2-to-1 by the Imperial fleet. Numbers aren't everything, Hayes reminded her. The Battle of Kalen Prime proved that... Kalen was a surprise, Morgan countered. The Vorak weren't prepared for our technology or tactics. They will be now. Hayes nodded, acknowledging the point. Which is why we need to evolve our approach. Earth's home defense grid was designed to repel conventional attacks. We need to adapt it for what's coming. He manipulated the display, showing Earth's solar system. I propose converting our outer mining stations into kinetic launch platforms. The asteroid belt provides nearly unlimited ammunition. Mars colonial defense systems can be repurposed for massive drone swarm production. General Parker, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. We've also been developing a new weapons system, magnetic accelerator cannons. They operate on similar principles to our railguns, but at a scale orders of magnitude larger. With Zenturi crystal focusing technology, they could penetrate even super dreadnought shields. And what of Earth itself? Rodriguez asked. Worst-case scenario planning? Hayes's expression grew somber. Civilian shelters are being expanded. Critical infrastructure is being hardened or moved underground. But I won't lie. Chancellor, if the Vorak break through our defenses, the casualties will be catastrophic. The room fell silent as the reality of what they faced sank in. Then we don't let them break through. Rodriguez finally said, her voice firm. Humanity has faced extinction before, During the resource wars, the climate collapse, we survived by innovating, adapting, and refusing to surrender. She looked around the table. Now we have allies who share our determination. Together, we will defend Earth and break the Vorak Empire's stranglehold on the galaxy. As the council adjourned, Hayes found himself joined by Captain Nico, who had been quietly observing the proceedings. "Your Chancellor is impressive," the Kalen officer remarked. "She reminds me of President Vale." Hayes nodded, a shadow crossing his features. "Vale gave her life to save her people. I hope Rodriguez won't face the same choice." "The difference," Nico said, "is that Vale stood alone against the Vorak. Earth does not." He gestured to where the various alien representatives were conferring. "Look at them, Admiral! Species that have been enemies or strangers for centuries, now united in common cause." Hayes watched the unlikely allies, the crystalline Zenturi, the blue-skinned Omega, the feathered Japari delegates, the insectoid Vreen representatives, all working together, sharing knowledge, planning a joint defense. "If we survive this," Hayes said quietly, "the galaxy will never be the same." Nico's expression was solemn but determined. "That, Admiral, is precisely why we must—" As the 5 weeks of preparation passed, Earth was transformed. Orbital defense platforms bristled with new weapons. The lunar surface, once home only to research stations and mining operations, now hosted massive cannon emplacements. Mars, its terraforming projects temporarily halted, had been converted into a vast manufacturing complex for combat drones and autonomous defense systems. Throughout the solar system, the Allied fleet conducted joint exercises, learning to coordinate their disparate technologies and tactics. Earth vessels practiced alongside Centauri cruisers and Omega destroyers, while Kalen ships provided logistics and coordination. Admiral Hayes watched from the bridge of the Redemption as a mixed squadron executed a perfect flanking maneuver against a simulated Vorak formation. The cooperation wasn't without friction, cultural misunderstandings, technological incompatibilities, occasional clashes of military doctrine. But the shared threat drove them to overcome these obstacles. "They're improving," Commander Reynolds noted, standing beside him. "They need to be better," Hayes replied. "The Vorak are coming with 1,000 years of military experience and a desire for vengeance." "Sir," Communications Officer Jang interrupted. "Long-range sensors have detected multiple hyperspace signatures approaching the outer system. Vorak configuration." Hayes straightened. "Alert status 1. All vessels to battle positions." Across the solar system, alarms sounded as the Allied fleet moved to pre-designated defensive formations. On Earth, civilian populations began moving to hardened shelters. The moment they had prepared for had arrived. The Vorak Imperial fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, a vast armada of warships stretching as far as sensors could detect. At their center loomed the Emperor's personal dreadnought, a vessel so massive it dwarfed even the largest Allied cruisers. "My God," Reynolds whispered as the tactical display filled with enemy signatures. Hayes studied the Vorak formation. "They're being cautious. Standard approach vector, maintaining tight formation." He turned to tactical. "Lieutenant Commander Ortiz, status of outer defense grid?" "All platforms online, Admiral. Kinetic launchers charged and ready." Hayes nodded. "Wait until they're within optimal range, then commence Operation Firewall." As the Vorak fleet advanced deeper into the system, they maintained their disciplined formation, clearly expecting a frontal engagement against the Allied fleet that had gathered around Earth's orbit. What they didn't expect was the attack that came from the seemingly empty space around them. "Kinetic platforms firing," Ortiz reported. Across the outer solar system, converted mining stations and hidden defense platforms unleashed torrents of accelerated debris, asteroids, metallic slugs, and specially designed penetrator rods. The barrage struck the Vorak formation from multiple vectors simultaneously, overwhelming their point defense systems. On the tactical display, Hayes watched as dozens of red dots winked out, representing Vorak vessels destroyed or disabled by the initial assault. But the Imperial fleet was massive, and the majority of ships continued their advance, adjusting formation to deal with the unexpected threat. "They're deploying screening vessels to absorb the kinetic bombardment," Reynolds observed. Adaptive tactics. Hayes nodded grimly. They learn quickly. Commence Phase 2. Throughout the asteroid belt, concealed launch facilities activated, releasing swarms of autonomous drones, tens of thousands of them, produced by the repurposed Martian factories. Unlike conventional drones, these were programmed with distributed intelligence algorithms, allowing them to coordinate attacks and adapt to enemy countermeasures in real time. The drone swarms descended on the Vorak fleet like locusts, targeting engines, weapon emplacements, and communication arrays. Individual drones could be destroyed easily, but their sheer numbers and constant adaptation to Vorak defensive measures made them devastatingly effective. Vorak fleet is fragmenting, Ortiz reported. They're breaking formation to deal with the drone attacks. Now, Hayes ordered, all fleet elements, execute pincer movement. The Allied fleet, which had been holding position near Earth, suddenly split into 3 battle groups, accelerating on vectors designed to catch the now separated Vorak forces in a massive encirclement. Earth vessels led the charge, their railguns and missile systems targeting the weakened Vorak ships. Zenturi cruisers followed, their crystal beam weapons slicing through Vorak shields. Omega destroyers deployed gravitational disruptors that further hindered Vorak maneuverability. The battle exploded across the solar system, a chaotic, swirling melee of ships, weapons fire, and debris. For hours, the tide seemed to shift back and forth, with neither side gaining a decisive advantage. The Allied forces had surprise and innovation on their side, but the Vorak had numbers and centuries of military experience. Then a new signal appeared on the tactical display. The Emperor's dreadnought was accelerating, breaking away from the main battle and driving directly toward Earth, accompanied by a screen of elite guard ships. They're making a run for the planet, Reynolds realized. If they get past our orbital defenses... They won't, Hayes said firmly. Redemption and Strike Group Alpha will intercept. The rest of the fleet continues current operations. As the Redemption and its escort vessels broke away to intercept the dreadnought, Hayes received a priority communication from Earth. Admiral. Chancellor Rodriguez's face appeared on the display, backdrop showing she was in the underground command center. Our planetary shields can withstand conventional bombardment, but if that dreadnought carries Nova charges... Hayes understood her concern. Nova charges, weapons that induced artificial solar flares, could overwhelm even the most powerful planetary shields, potentially rendering Earth's surface uninhabitable. We'll stop them, Chancellor. Hayes looked to tactical. Lieutenant Commander Ortiz, target the dreadnought's forward sections with everything we have. Focus on weapon emplacements. As the Redemption's battle group closed with the Emperor's dreadnought, they unleashed a coordinated barrage of railgun fire and missile salvos. The massive Vorak vessel shuddered under the assault, but its shields held. Minimal damage, Ortiz reported. Their shields are significantly stronger than standard Vorak configurations. Hayes had expected as much. Deploy the MAX. The magnetic accelerator cannons, massive weapons developed by combining Earth technology with Zenturi focusing crystals, extended from concealed bays on the Redemption and 2 escort cruisers. They began charging, drawing enormous power from the ship's reactors. Max at 80% charge, Ortiz announced. Targeting solution locked. The dreadnought, seemingly recognizing the threat, suddenly altered course, bringing its main batteries to bear on the Redemption. Brilliant beams of energy lanced out, striking the Earth flagship with devastating force. Shields failing, Reynolds shouted as the ship shuddered around them. Hull breaches on decks 12 through 15. Maintain position, Hayes ordered, gripping his command chair as another impact rocked the vessel. Max status? 95%, 100% charged. Fire! The magnetic accelerator cannons discharged simultaneously, sending 3 hyperdense projectiles toward the Vorak dreadnought at a significant fraction of light speed, enhanced by Zenturi crystal technology. The projectiles passed through the dreadnought's shields as if they weren't there, striking the massive vessel at precisely calculated points. The impact was catastrophic. The dreadnought's forward section crumpled, massive breaches opening across its hull as secondary explosions cascaded through its systems. Its escorts, caught in the shockwave, were thrown into disarray. Direct hits, Ortiz reported, unable to keep the elation from his voice. Dreadnought's main weapon systems are offline. They're venting atmosphere across multiple decks. Hayes leaned forward. Open a channel to the Dreadnought. After a moment, the view screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the Vorak vessel. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the chaotic scene. In the center stood a figure in ornate armor, the Emperor himself, his war helm damaged to reveal part of his face, twisted in fury. Emperor Kane, Hayes addressed him formally. Your dreadnought is crippled. Your fleet is being decimated. Withdraw now, and we will permit your remaining vessels safe passage out of our system. You dare offer terms to the Vorak Empire? Kane's voice was cold with rage. You are nothing. A primitive species that should have been crushed centuries ago. A primitive species that just destroyed half your fleet. Hayes countered. Look around you, Emperor. The galaxy has united against your tyranny. This is your only warning. Leave or be destroyed. Kane's expression contorted with hatred. I will see your world burn, human. If not today, then tomorrow, or the next day. The Empire is eternal. Hayes regarded him steadily. Nothing is eternal. Emperor, especially not empires built on fear and conquest. Before Kane could respond, a secondary explosion rocked the Dreadnought's bridge, and the transmission cut out. They're powering emergency engines, Ortiz reported. Attempting to withdraw? Let them go. Hayes ordered. Focus fire on any vessels still threatening Earth. As the crippled Dreadnought limped away, the tide of battle definitively turned. Without their Emperor's flagship leading the charge, and with nearly a third of their vessels already destroyed or disabled. The Vorak fleet began a disorganized retreat. Allied vessels pursued selectively, focusing on destroying weapons platforms and engines to render Vorak ships combat ineffective while allowing evacuation pods to escape. It was a demonstration of mercy that the Vorak themselves rarely showed. Hours later, as the last Vorak ships jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a debris field that would orbit the sun for millennia, Hayes stood on the observation deck of the damaged Redemption, looking out at Earth, beautiful, blue, and still safe. Captain Nico joined him, his uniform stained with coolant from helping repair crews during the battle. We've won, Admiral. Hayes nodded slowly. This battle, yes, but the war is just beginning. Nico finished for him. The Emperor escaped. The Vorak still control hundreds of worlds, but something fundamental has changed. He gestured to where Earth hung in space, surrounded by the gathered Allied fleet. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy believes the Vorak can be defeated. Belief isn't enough, Hayes said. We need structure, coordination, shared purpose. Then let's build it. Nico replied simply, the foundation already exists in this alliance. Hayes considered the Kalan captain's words. The coalition that had formed to defend Earth had been born of necessity, but perhaps it could become something more, something that would ensure lasting peace, not just for humanity or the Kalan, but for all species who valued freedom. I think, Hayes said slowly, it's time we formalized our arrangement. 1 month after the Battle of Earth, representatives from 27 spacefaring civilizations gathered aboard Unity Station, a repurposed Zenturi diplomatic vessel positioned in neutral space. The station's central chamber had been modified to accommodate delegates of all species, from the towering Zenturi to the diminutive Vreen. Admiral Hayes stood with Captain Nico, observing the gathering from a balcony overlooking the main floor. Both wore formal uniforms representing their respective worlds. I never thought I'd see this day, Nico said quietly. The Zenturi and Omega diplomats actually agreeing on procedure. The Japari and Vreen sharing a table without incident? Hayes smiled slightly. Nothing unites like a common enemy. It's more than that, Nico insisted. The Vorak Empire maintained power partly by keeping potential rivals divided, playing civilizations against each other. When Earth answered our distress call, with no guarantee of benefit or alliance, you broke that pattern. You showed the galaxy another way. Before Hayes could respond, Chancellor Rodriguez approached, accompanied by the Kalan's new president, a dignified woman named Solana, who had been a provincial governor before the fall of Kalen Prime. "Admiral, Captain," Rodriguez greeted them. "The delegates are ready to begin the signing ceremony." As they moved to join the gathering, Hayes noted the changes in the galactic political landscape that had occurred in just 1 month. The Vorak Empire, while not destroyed, had been severely weakened. With the Emperor's return in disgrace, rebellions had broken out across Vorak-controlled territories. Long-subjugated species were reclaiming their independence, often with assistance from Alliance forces. The ceremony itself was brief but profound. One by one, representatives from each civilization approached the central table to sign the Treaty of Earth, a document establishing the Galactic Defense Alliance, dedicated to mutual protection, peaceful cooperation, and the liberation of worlds still under Vorak control. When it was Earth's turn, Chancellor Rodriguez signed with a flourish, then stepped aside for Hayes to add his signature as Earth's military representative. As Hayes put pen to paper, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from a desperate distress call to a historic alliance that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The cost had been high. Thousands of lives lost, ships destroyed, worlds damaged. But the alternative, allowing the Vorak to continue their reign of terror unchallenged, would have been unthinkable. After the ceremony concluded, Hayes found himself on an observation platform with Captain Nico, looking out at the assembled fleet that now comprised the Alliance's combined forces. Ships of all designs and origins moved in coordinated patterns, running joint exercises and exchanging personnel and technology. "What happens now?" Nico asked, though Hayes suspected he already knew the answer. "Now we take the fight to the Vorak." Hayes replied, "Not for conquest or revenge, but to free those still suffering under their rule, to build something better in place of their empire." Nico nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars beyond the fleet. "My people have a saying, the universe bends toward justice, but only when helped by the just." Hayes considered this. "On Earth we say something similar. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." "Perhaps our species aren't so different after all," Nico observed. "No," Hayes agreed. "And perhaps that's the most important lesson from all of this. Beneath our different appearances, technologies, and cultures, we share common values: freedom, compassion, the right to determine our own futures." They stood in companionable silence, watching as a group of Earth and Kalen vessels performed a perfectly synchronized maneuver, species that had been strangers just months ago, now working as one, when President Vale sent out that distress call. Nico said finally, "She had no way of knowing if anyone would answer. She acted on faith that somewhere in the galaxy, someone would hear our plea and respond." Hayes nodded. "And because she had that faith, because Earth answered, everything has changed." Below them, the newly commissioned Alliance flagship, a joint Earth-Centauri design named Unity, prepared for its maiden voyage. Its mission: to carry the promise of liberation to the farthest reaches of Vorak territory, to show oppressed worlds that they were no longer alone. The Vorak believed themselves invincible. Nico reflected that their technology, their numbers, their brutality made them unbeatable. A common mistake of empires. Hayes said, "They forget that the strongest force in the universe isn't technology or numbers. It's unity. People of goodwill, standing together against tyranny." As if to punctuate his words, the Unity's engines flared to life, a brilliant blue glow against the darkness of space. Around it, vessels from a dozen worlds moved into escort formation, their different designs creating a striking visual harmony. "It begins," Nico said softly. Hayes nodded, feeling the weight of history and the promise of the future converge in this moment. "Yes," he agreed. "It begins." The fleet accelerated away from Unity Station, carrying with it the hopes of countless beings across the galaxy, a galaxy forever changed by a single distress call, answered against all odds by those who refused to stand idle in the face of injustice.